My name is Zoe. I am an operating partner at EQT Ventures, which is a multi-stage fund in Europe. They have just over £500 million to invest in startups over the next few years. As I said, multi-stage, mainly tech companies, either B2C or B2B companies. And prior to joining EQT Ventures a few months ago, I was actually in this very building working for EF as the global director of talent, where I was there for just over 4 years. So that's my background. So on the panel we have Czech, who is from Seraphim Ventures, and we have Michael, who's from Downing, and both of them actually used to work together. So I joked that we might reverse the introductions and get them to each other, but they weren't a fan. So I'm going to hand over straight to you, Czech, to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I am Czech, or Francesca. I am the co-founder and CEO of Diversity VC, which is an organisation set up to promote diversity in venture capital. So it's awesome to be here talking about this with everyone and all about kind of making this industry more inclusive. My day job, I'm currently at Seraphim Capital, which is a space-focused fund, so literally investing in satellites and rockets and crazy things like that, drones and all sorts of wild things. And prior to that, I actually worked with Michael, as Zoe mentioned, at Downing Ventures. So I was there for 2.5 years, invested in 34 companies, including 2 of the fastest growing European tech startups, named like 2 days ago, Truva and Papier. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. So my name is Michael Tefula. I'm an associate at Downing Ventures. So I used to work with Czech. We are a early stage venture capital fund. So we invest in sort of seed to Series A companies, and we are sector agnostic. So we can invest in drone companies, e-commerce companies, enterprise SaaS, and a whole range of other things. I was originally born in Uganda, so my accent is a little bit mixed with a whole bunch of different things. I grew up in Birmingham. And yeah, very happy to be here. I'll try and answer as many questions as I can. I'll try and stick around towards the end as well, if anyone wishes to have a chat. Thank you.
Cool. So I'm really interested in going kind of way back to the very beginning when you were thinking about venture, if you were at all. So before you entered the workforce, did you know you wanted to build a career in venture capital?
Yeah, the really weird connection for me is that I actually went to the first ever EF recruitment day at university when they came, before they were recruiting sort of technical founders. I studied English, so I had no real reason for being there, other than I thought, entrepreneurship sounds quite cool and interesting, tech maybe sounds kind of interesting, and Alice and Matt were there, and they were talking about this thing called Entrepreneur First. They'd never had a cohort before. And I was like, that sounds kind of cool, but then I just thought, well, I need a real job, probably, and my parents were like, you need a real job, so go on, join a graduate scheme. And so I applied for a graduate scheme, and the application deadline for EF was after I got my job on this graduate scheme. And I think that a lot of people kind of fall into things because it's sort of the first thing that comes along, or they're kind of worried about money, or they want that security and stability. And I just didn't think forward to what was going to happen in the future enough. I think I kind of did a little bit because I was at that day, but I just didn't follow that thought through. So I guess I was super interested in theatre when I was younger, and I wanted to be an actress, and I wanted to go into sort of a really creative world. So it's kind of weird to be in finance, I guess, for me now. I think one thing I would say is, just don't listen to your parents, because I had this kind of whole journey from listening to them, and that's kind of why I started in advertising, and I did that for 3 years. And even leaving advertising and joining venture, which maybe I'll talk about, was a real leap, and was really difficult because it was persuading my parents that I wasn't kind of committing career suicide, which is a lot, I think, of what people have to go through, particularly. My parents both come from kind of a relatively commercial world, but if your parents don't, then it's even more difficult.
How about you? Was it a similar story?
Yeah, so I can totally relate to the parent point. I've got African parents, and you either become an accountant, a doctor, or a lawyer, or an engineer. So I started my career at Deloitte, which is a consulting tax accounting firm, and it was a very safe choice. And sort of 3 years into that, I realized actually I don't want to be working as an accountant or as a consultant. I want to be investing. But at the time, I didn't really know what venture capital was. I didn't even know what private equity was. So it was like a completely foreign world to me. So very much like Czech, actually, making that leap from, okay, you're going to leave a big company to go and work in this weird industry called venture capital. I mean, what is that? Like, how many jobs are there? Like, do you get job security when you're working as a VC? So it's quite the leap. And actually, looking back now, actually, it's one of the best decisions I've ever made, in my view, I think.
Maybe just to add to that story about going from advertising to venture, because that's a very weird thing in and of itself. I had a very random opportunity that came about because I was interested in technology, and then decided that technology, if you want to work in it, it's probably three things: maybe starting a company yourself, joining an existing tech company, or this thing called venture capital. But I had no idea what venture capital was, didn't know anyone who worked in it, didn't know how to get into it. So I met one person that worked in it, and I basically just printed out my CV and gave it to him. So I was like, oh, you're the first person I met, can you give me a job? And that sort of worked. In the 6 months later, after I'd kind of basically barraged him with this application and said how amazing I was going to be, and kind of said, I just, please, 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 he then said, okay, you've kind of worn me down, I can take you on, and that was Downing Ventures, and that was becoming the second hire in that team. But at the same time as having these conversations with this person, I was trying to tell my parents about it. And their verbatim comments were, he's trying to hire you as a PA, and he's trying to give you another job title to make it seem like you're not a PA, but actually you're just going to be arranging meetings for him. So don't do it. Second comment was, you're not good enough at maths, finance, insert phrase here, you'll never do this job well, you're not qualified. And this was like from my own parents. So it was quite depressing and bleak. And it was really hurtful, obviously, because I thought, well, I appreciate you're trying to sort of look out for me, but equally, you totally doubt my ability to do this. So I ended up having to write them a letter, and I wrote them a kind of 6-page letter, which was taking every single comment they had made and writing like a little essay underneath about why that wasn't right. So it was like, I'm going to be hired as a PA, not an actual investor. Well, these are the sort of 10 pieces of evidence that says that that's not the case. And I'm not good at maths. Okay, here's another 10. So that was how systematic I kind of ended up having to be. And I think a bit of that was about persuading them, but a lot of it was also about persuading myself and distinguishing my own feelings, my own sense of identity from what they thought and wanted. So that's sort of
sounds like
how I
you
did
really
it.
wanted it. You put the time in to write that essay. One of the questions I had, just coming back to the piece about how you actually interact and engage with a VC in the first place, I think one of the things people ask me is it all about networking? Is that the only way you can get in front of a VC for a job? Sounds like networking played a big role for you, but was it the same in your entry point?
Yeah, so I mean, crazy. Actually, my first entry into venture capital was through Twitter. And actually, strangely enough, we connected through Twitter as well at some point. So it's all about networks, and you have to do everything and anything you can to kind of establish those networks. Even when you're an entrepreneur, I think some of the things that VCs look for are how well connected is this founder, right? Do they have connections with particular people in the ecosystem, right? And can they actually build on those connections? We've got so many tools now. Some of the people that I've looked up to and got advice from has been through Twitter. So other VCs in the States, in the UK. So there's lots of different channels that we can use, and I would say, networking is absolutely spot on.
Yeah. And the reason why I met this person who's a VC was actually through a mentor, who I'd asked to mentor me about career things, and it was as informal as just going and having a chat about tech and what I wanted to do, and whether he could sort of give me some advice. And he was an entrepreneur himself. And that's how he said, I know this one venture capitalist who he, in fact, had only met the previous week. So it wasn't as if there was sort of a ready-made thing. You kind of have to go out and try and find it. But I think defining what you are looking for is also really important. So if it's tech, what bit of tech, and what can you bring to the table to them? And I know there's people in this room who do a lot of writing, which is another thing that you can do through Medium. Send your post to people. I've just someone could say to me, I've just written this piece about synthetic biology, would you like to read it? Yeah, definitely. VCs are always interested and curious about finding out about new kinds of technologies. So if you can kind of be helpful to them, that's a great way of building the relationship.
What were in your sales pitches to the VCs about yourselves? What did you say you could bring to that particular fund, if you remember?
Well, mine was really simple because I had no idea what the hell VC was, so I couldn't talk about that. I had no connections to founders, so it was really about saying I can be operationally helpful as well as looking for companies. Like, you're going to have to teach me everything else, but what I will do is I will help the companies on marketing, branding, go-to-market, acquisition strategies, communication, all this stuff that I didn't really know how to do, but I sort of thought I'd learn once I'd got in there. But because I had 3 years in advertising, I was able to kind of trade that up into saying that I could do all of that stuff.
Yeah, just to touch on that as well. I'm trying to think back to how many sort of applications are made to various VC funds, and each application was slightly different. But some of the best advice I got actually was to sort of do my CV as a pitch deck. So instead of like sending out a CV to a whole bunch of VC funds, I was sending pitch decks about myself. So you would talk about your potential, and you would talk about your network, and you would talk about your experience. But having it presented as a pitch deck made it a lot easier to digest. And VCs love reading pitch decks, so that seemed to work for me.
Speaking their language, to get some. And for you, you mentioned there were a few people on Twitter that you had followed that helped you make that decision. Who were some of the role models or people's blogs that you were reading to learn more about VC, or that attracted you to that as a profession?
So I follow a lot of people on Twitter, and it's hard for me to sort of use the word role model, because when you use the word role model, it's like you create this caricature of a infallible sort of person that's completely perfect, but actually they have their weaknesses and strengths. But I would say I do follow a lot of VCs, but also follow a lot of entrepreneurs, because we spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs, and so we want to make sure that we understand the psychology of an entrepreneur and some of the challenges that entrepreneurs face and how we can relate to that. But some of the things I've learned have been from a whole wide range of people. Some of those people in this room actually that I've learned an incredible amount from. Czech, I've learned quite a lot from Czech as well, because I've had a chance to work with her for a little bit less than a year. But the pace at which she would pick up things and learn things just inspired me to actually be a lot more active and a lot more engaged with sort of helping entrepreneurs.
That's very kind. I didn't pay him before this. But I think there's a ton of books out there that are worth reading, definitely. I mean, 0 to 1, I think is the title of this evening, which is a great book about picking companies and thinking about growing companies. And there's just so many. The podcasts as well are really, really good on VC. So the 20-minute VC, if anyone hasn't come across that, you should. A podcast called Invest Like the Best is really good. There's also one called Origins, which is about interviewing the investors in VC, and all of that stuff kind of helps you get immersed in what these people are thinking on a day-to-day basis, and it should help kind of build empathy as well, because it's like any sales process, it's about building empathy, building relationships, and then ultimately using that to sort of make your ask at the right time.
I think the Bible is also Venture Deals, which is, if you haven't already read it, it's a super detailed and kind of 101 on what you need to know about terms in VC, but it was a good crash course.
Yeah, I guess one other thing to say is that anyone can be a VC now, which is quite exciting, in that you've got crowdfunding platforms out there, you can build your own miniature portfolio, and a great way of building relationships with VCs is sourcing for them and saying, I've seen this company, I think it's interesting for these 3 bullet point reasons, or I've invested in these 5 companies and this is why. That's just like anyone has the opportunity to do that, even with as little as like £10.
And I think the trend is, before you used to have to be a banker or worked in M&A to have a shot at being a VC, but now funds actually want to hire people that are coming from operational backgrounds or founding backgrounds. So there are non-traditional paths now into VC. It's not a kind of cookie cutter role, which is interesting. I actually want to move on quickly to ask you, what is the best thing about working for the funds that you work for?
For me, it's just spending time with phenomenal entrepreneurs every day. It's just really simple. Just the variety of different people that you can meet, being able to help them, empower them to achieve what they want to achieve is just the best thing ever.
Yeah, I think, I would definitely relate to that as well. Just, having the opportunity to be with like a lot of really smart people and a lot of really driven people. In a lot of ways, being a venture capitalist is a lot easier than being an entrepreneur. Like, it's incredibly hard being an entrepreneur. So anything we can do to sort of support, these amazing people who are transforming society across so many different domains, it's a privilege and honor, because, entrepreneurs inspire VCs, because, what entrepreneurs are building is incredible and impactful.
And my next question, what's the worst thing or the most frustrating thing about being a VC?
I'll let Czech answer that one first.
Yeah, I think it's about having magpie syndrome. If you're someone who doesn't enjoy tons of different things being thrown at you all the time and switching into different brain spaces, like from, as Michael says, drones to e-commerce to AI to something else, and you like to kind of focus on building something and really, really making it great, VC is probably not the right thing for you. You need to be very, very curious, but have that kind of switching ability, and I think that can be really quite frustrating for people. Yeah.
So I think also we say no a lot. So if you see 100 opportunities, you have to turn down almost 90, 95 of them. And if you love the entrepreneur and you love the company, you love the opportunity, and you have to say no to them, it's incredibly hard. So we have to do that a lot. And it's very hard to sort of do it cold, because, if the entrepreneur is great, they're building an amazing business, an amazing company, it can be challenging to just turn around and say, actually, we can't invest for this reason or that reason. So I think for me, that's the most frustrating part, but it might change.
Absolutely, I totally agree. Okay, 3 quick-fire questions, because then we're going to move to the questions that have been submitted by the audience. Technology trend you're most excited about right now?
Okay, that's hard. I'm going to say the application of machine learning to synthetic biology, like using kind of algorithmic techniques to discover new kinds of materials and proteins and drugs, I think is kind of amazing and life-changing potentially.
I'm going to say the B word, decentralization. I would say blockchain, but I think the idea of decentralization, for me, that's super, super exciting. The idea that instead of having a central concentration of power, you can have a distributed, decentralized form of wealth, for example. So with cryptocurrencies and companies that are raising cryptocurrencies and doing cryptocurrency fundraising, anyone can invest in those companies. There is a lot of companies out there that are doing this in a very negative way, so I would definitely try and be a little bit careful, but I think the idea of decentralization is going to be incredibly powerful.
Okay, one characteristic that you think is absolutely essential for founders coming to pitch VCs?
This is just a personal opinion, but I think the ability to sell is really key. Not enough people do sales training before they go and pitch VCs, or sell their company to when they're hiring people, or sell to customers. I think especially maybe more technical founders feel like that's not important. It's so, so important. And the whole pitching process is just a massive sales process.
Probably resilience, or the ability to sort of bounce back from setbacks. People that can be, there's a guy called Nassim Taleb who writes about anti-fragility. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So people that can be turned down but then come back and do incredibly better than they would had they not had that setback.
Yeah. And last one from me, what's your one prediction for how VC is going to change in the next 10 years as an industry?
I'm going to borrow Michael's word and say decentralization. I think that is a trend within kind of token funds, obviously, but it's also a trend within VC, whereby I think the centralized model of having a VC with some associates looking at companies on a screen and meeting people at events is just not going to be true in 10 years' time. I think we're going to have distributed people finding companies, distributed people doing due diligence, distributed investors, and it's all going to be kind of merge in a very exciting way.
Yeah, I've not been in the industry that long, so I'm not sure about my answer, but I think it's going to be more diverse. I think that there's a lot of pressure on the industry actually now, and it's starting to change thanks to the work that Diversity VC and a bunch of other organizations are doing. So yeah, it will be decentralized and more diverse, hopefully.
Totally agree. So, questions that have been submitted through the app. First one is, can you run a startup with a full-time job? And if so, if not, when is the best time to quit your job and focus on it full-time?
I think Michael and I are both kind of side hustlers, and I know Andy's a side hustler as well. I think there's actually a lot of benefit in doing things concurrently and doing things on the side and not necessarily jumping into something until you know that it's exactly what you want to do. Having said that, if someone came to pitch us for funding, we would not invest in a founder that was not full-time. So you have to be full-time on your business if you're intending to make that your kind of permanent thing, I think. But I think, VC funding is not the only option at all, and we set up Diversity VC as a non-profit. There's tons of other company structures you can use and things that work much more seamlessly with your risk appetite and your life, frankly.
I've got nothing to add to that. I think that's quite comprehensive.
Cool.
Yeah.
There's a pretty funny question on here about the $150 million funding round that scooter rental startup Bird just raised. And the question is about VC FOMO. So is that a real thing? Is SF a big bubble?
Yeah, so FOMO, when I joined the industry, like the one thing I always knew was that I'm definitely going to miss out on some amazing companies. If you're seeing a lot of pitch decks on a weekly basis, you're going to turn down companies that are going to become incredible companies later on. Saying that, it is still quite, you do feel it. Like, for example, this company that I passed on late last year and they've been acquired this year. So you do kind of feel that, like, damn, I wish I was in that company. But it's just part of the job. Like, you're definitely going to miss out on something, and it can be quite challenging to sort of stay away from the hype around a particular opportunity. But you really have to try and protect yourself against that.
Cool. There's a question on here, how do you find a co-founder? The answer is join EF, so I'm going to skip that one. There's one around being appealing to VCs in the pitch, and I know we've already said that we think skills such as selling are important. Is there anything around how you should engage a VC over a long period of time, if perhaps a VC is passed on you on your first meeting? How do you stay in touch? What's the best way?
Yeah, I think this is a really simple one that I see so few entrepreneurs doing. It's actually mind-boggling because it's so effective. But literally an email, MailChimp, round robin with the 30, 40, 50 prospects that you spoke to. Keep them updated on your wins, the clients you're winning, the conferences you're going to, the hires you've just made, and make them feel that FOMO. It's true, they do feel FOMO all the time. They're terrified of missing out on the next thing because VC economics, really simply, it's going to be literally one company that's going to make that whole fund work or not. So they just don't want to miss that one company. And making them feel momentum with what you're doing, especially if they've said no, is just super effective. And at the end of that little round robin, you can also say, and my ask is, can you introduce me to a customer from this category? And often that will lead to some great relationships as well. So do that, I think.
Good. We have one more question time left. So does anyone from the audience here want to ask one live?
Putting you on the spot.
Stunned silence.
Hey guys, just a quick one. How do you make networking count, right? Like you connect with people on LinkedIn or you exchange emails, but a lot of people are doing that anyways, right? So how do you make it count in the sense that, hey, I send a connection request, you connected, but how do you make sure there is, that conversation happening rather than a one-way, hey, it's me again?
How do you make sure you're not a pest?
So I think it's more about quality than quantity. Try and find people that you can connect with on a less superficial level. So you don't have to be going to events just dishing out business cards, like, practically, right? Try and find a point of connection. So when I think about the people that kind of helped me get into the VC industry, we had a connection over something other than being a VC or a particular piece of work. So if you can focus on quality rather than quantity, I think you'll make quite a bit of progress.
And I would say LinkedIn is quite a tricky platform because I think it's quite spammy. I'd say Twitter is a great way because people, obviously writing things that look, talking about subjects, and you could write a little post or a tweet storm or whatever it is to contribute to that conversation. And then if they respond to it, follow up and DM them and say, hey, I'd love to, show you my full Medium article on this and get your thoughts, and start building that rapport, as Michael says, about something other than I kind of want to get a job or can you give me money, because it's just not a great way to connect with them. And so in fact that's how Michael and I met, through Diversity VC, and that's kind of how things happened. So yeah.
And how can people have a conversation with you on Twitter? What's your handles?
My handle is just Michael Tefula.
And mine is Check Warner.
There you go, full permission to spam their inboxes. Thank you so much, Czech and Michael. That was super, super useful and insightful. Let's give them a round of applause.